for our that are not able to join us due to the time difference. And please kindly ensure to all our colleagues to ensure that you are all muted, except when the panelist takes the floor. Our question and answer segment will be at the end of the presentations. However, there will also be an opportunity for questions right after Ambassador Tevi's intervention. Please feel free to also write your questions in the chat, and our dear colleague Bianca will also take notes of those questions. Today, Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, today we will spotlight the urgent need for countries to keep 1.5 alive. The recent milestone ICJ Advisory Opinion on the legal obligations of states in respect of climate change, the importance of national determined contributions 3.0, and the science that should drive our climate negotiations. Countries are not keeping their commitments, and in this 10th year since the Paris Agreement, the inaction which deepens the challenges of small island developing states is a clear breach of justice. And we hope that after hearing and interacting with our presenters, our audience has a clear understanding of why our world must demand increased ambition from our leaders on climate change. And we have to do what is right for the vulnerable. And we are holding this webinar in right at the right time for UN General Assemblies happening next week. And so this webinar is very, very much needed for a good discussion and preparation for our high-level speakers and our leaders and our ambassadors to head into ONGO with this information and this up-to-date conversation between us in terms of understanding and keeping the line on 1.5. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, our AOSIS chair, Her Excellency Ilana Seed, who will expound on these issues. Ambassador Seed is the permanent representative of Palau to the United Nations and is also our chair for Alliance of Small Island States. She's also the co-chair of the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy and the blue economy and finance forum. So with that, I welcome Ambassador Seed for your remarks. Thank you. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Good morning, distinguished colleagues, friends, and all those who are committed to climate justice. And I'm not sure, my video doesn't seem to be on. I don't know if there's something that technicals can do on the back end, but I will just stay on audio if nobody can figure that out. It's my honor to speak to you on behalf of the 39 vulnerable small island developing states, which comprise AOSIS. I speak for Palau, where warmer seas are bleaching coral reefs, the lifeblood of fisheries, food security, biodiversity, and cultural identity. I give voice to Antigua and Barbuda, which suffered over 155 million in losses and damages from Hurricane Irma, reflecting the debilitating debt cycle. Okay, I think you might be able to see me now. Sorry, everybody. So I give voice to Antigua and Barbuda, which suffered over 155 million in losses and damages from Hurricane Irma, reflecting the debilitating debt cycle many of our SIDS face in addressing escalating climate impacts. I speak for Tuvalu, where entire communities are being forced to consider relocation as the sea quite literally takes their land from them. And I'm speaking out today for all of the vulnerable people who have made the least contribution to this climate crisis, yet are paying the most devastating price. Our countries are living through these devastating impacts right now. Warming above 1.5 degrees Celsius increase will be a point of no return for many of our islands. And let's just be clear, for small island developing states, 1.5 degrees Celsius is not just a number, it's not a suggestion, and certainly not a bargaining chip. It is our lifeline. And the world, particularly major emitters, have no license to abandon it. At a time when global politics seems to delight in division, the climate crisis demands that we reunite to defend the 1.5 degree goal and remember that we're indeed one human family. SIDS have always been the moral compass for ambitious climate action. We were the driving force, not just behind the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, and our countries were also at the heart of the recent ICJ Advisory Opinion, which reaffirmed that 1.5 degrees Celsius goal is not just a mere suggestion. This is the legally relevant benchmark for the world's warming limit. When SIDS say 1.5 to stay alive, it's not simply a slogan. It's grounded on the best available science to safeguard a prosperous future for all nations, but especially the most vulnerable. The Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius limit was set in 2015, considering equity to minimize the injustice and harm created by higher levels of warming to those least responsible for the crisis. The extreme climate damages observed since then reinforce the urgency of action. We now know more than ever that 1.5 degrees Celsius is a physical limit, the guardrail that minimizes the worst impacts, risks, and loss and damage. 1.5 degrees Celsius would limit the risk of major Earth system tipping points being crossed. Crossing these tipping points would lead to catastrophic damages to ecosystems, people, economies, and infrastructure worldwide. The science is loud and clear, yet climate action is still insufficient despite incremental progress, and the increasing likelihood of at least temporarily exceeding the long-term 1.5 degrees Celsius limit of the Paris Agreement is clear. Every increment of warming and even a temporary overshoot will rapidly increase irreversible and adverse impacts and losses. But overshoot would not mean the failure of the Paris Agreement. It would mean the failure of political will. We know what must be done. We know it can be done, and we know that the obstacle is political will, and no government has the right to withhold that will when our very lives and futures are at stake. The 1.5 degrees Celsius limit remains the legal, moral, and political anchor of international and domestic climate action. AOSIS is consistently called on countries to submit new NDCs, which include updated 2030 targets and new 2035 targets, which are 1.5 degrees Celsius aligned. NDCs must be submitted by the September 2025 deadline to be included in the NDC synthesis report, and major emitters must show that they will implement the outcomes of the first global stocktake, particularly the energy package. The NDC synthesis report will likely reveal there's a shortfall on ambition to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and therefore AOSIS is very clear that COP30 must deliver an outcome which responds to this. We're unwilling to accept the COP30 outcome without a clear way forward on how mitigation ambition will be taken up to get the world on track to limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Implementation is also a key issue for AOSIS at COP30. And the key enabler of implementation for SIDS is climate finance. The roadmap to 1.3 trillion must deliver adequate, predictable, non-debt creating finance for SIDS for the implementation of climate action for mitigation, including NDCs, adaptation, and loss and damage. Without climate finance, SIDS cannot implement climate action nor advance sustainable development. And climate finance is not charity, it's justice. At COP30, AOSIS will also work to ensure that decision-making continues to be informed by the best available science. The IPCC's seventh assessment reports must align with the second global stocktake. The continuation of periodic reviews of the long-term goal under the UNFCCC is essential to ensure science continues to guide ambition. COP30 will be a pivotal moment for the world to hold the line on 1.5. And if countries at COP30 fail to deliver a credible pathway to reduce emissions and limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, it will not just be a missed opportunity, it will be a betrayal of the most vulnerable. Finally, the International Court of Justice has affirmed to us that 1.5 degrees is not optional, it's an obligation. And science informs us that every fraction of a degree matters. So as the SIDS are urging the world, yet again, to act now, because our collective future is at stake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Ambassador. for those enlightening remarks. And thank you for your important insights, Ambassador. You've set a clear scene for what lays ahead for us at COP30. And I hope we can count on the enhanced cooperation and ambition of the international community to achieve what is needed. So thank you again to Chair of AOSIS for those setting the scene for our discussion today. Now, colleagues and excellencies, we are honored to have with us His Excellency Odo Tevi, the permanent representative of the Republic of Vanuatu to the United Nations since 2014. He has served as the Pacific Small Island Developing State PSIDS chair. He was also Vanuatu's special envoy on climate change, garnering political support from all UN member states to support the UN General Assembly resolution on seeking the advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice on climate change in 2023. Ambassador Tevi will enlighten us on SIDS leadership on this landmark case and how its results can strengthen our fight to maintain the 1.5 goal. Audience, please be reminded that you will have a brief opportunity to relay questions to Ambassador Tevi and Ambassador Seed right after this presentation. Ambassador Tevi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Ambassador, loud and clear. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I will be speaking through audio, given that I think I have challenges with my camera.
Okay. Thank you.
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, warm thanks to AOSIS for convening this very timely conversation a few weeks before the pre-COP meeting in Brazil. It is always an honor to gather with fellow small island developing states and partners to reaffirm what unites us, the struggle to protect our peoples, safeguard our cultures, and defend the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold. The advisory opinion, the ICJ Advisory Opinion, is not only a legal milestone, it is the outcome of a collective journey led by SIDS, supported by many of you here today. It is a proof that when we unite, our voices can shift the foundations of international law. In 2019, Vanuatu began the campaign for the UN General Assembly to request an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice. This was not an easy path. It required unprecedented coalition building across regions, generations, and legal traditions. In March 2023, the resolution was adopted by consensus, marking UN history. The court has now delivered its opinion in July this year, and it is historic. Among its findings, one, it affirms, and I quote, that climate change is essentially universal risk. Two, it confirms binding obligations under customary international law, the duty to prevent harm, the duty to cooperate in good faith, protection of human rights, and the duty of non-refoulement. Third, it recognizes the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as essential right and environmental protection as a precondition of other human rights. And it makes clear that the breaches entail consequences, cessation, guarantees of non-repetitive, and reparations, including restitution, compensation, and satisfaction. For SIDS, it is recognized our special circumstances and confirmed that our maritime boundaries and statehood are preserved in the context of sea level rise. And finally, importantly, The court also confirmed that climate change obligations are owed to the international community as a whole, and therefore we will all have interest in ensuring that they are complied with. For Vanuatu, the ICJ opinion is an opportunity to address some of the systemic inequalities in the global governance system our nations have been born into, and this is something we are planning to propose via UNGA resolution in the coming months. We are also embedding the court's conclusion in our national climate commitments. Our updated NDCs 3.0 demonstrates some of the ways the opinion can be implemented at the national level with international impact. For example, all licensing, permitting, and procurement will pass through an ICJ implementation test, ensuring projects comply with the stringent due diligence and environmental impact assessment standards clarified by the court. We are establishing measures to call out states breaching international law and notifying them of invocation of state responsibility and legal consequences that may follow. Domestic legislation will be revised to reflect the principle of non-refoulement so that climate-displaced people are not returned to climate-impacted areas where their lives are threatened and treated with dignity. We are securing our maritime limitations and baselines under UNCLOS so that rising seas cannot threaten our control over ocean resources or erase our sovereignty. And we will establish a national loss and damage claims and evidence facility linked to our loss and damage fund to systematically document climate harm and provide an institutional pathway for reparations and justice. For COP30, the opinion strengthens our hand to demand more ambitious NDCs with commitments meeting the legal requirements for 1.5 degrees Celsius, robust and accessible climate finance, technology transfer, and capacity building, but also transparent and equitable processes for accessing loss and damage funds or mechanisms for reparations for climate harm. A rapid and just transition away from fossil fuels and fossil phase-out. Colleagues, this journey from a Pacific Island initiative to the biggest legal case in the history of the World Court demonstrates the transformative power of SIDS leadership. The ICJ opinion is a tool that SIDS have given to the world, but this tool must now be wielded by all. Together, we can ensure that 1.5 degrees Celsius is not treated as an aspiration, but as a legal and moral obligation. Let me close with this. The ICJ Advisory Opinion is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of structural change. The court has given us the legal authority. Now we must give it life through our own laws, our institutions, our regional solidarity, and our diplomacy on the road to COP30. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Odo, for those inspiring remarks and also demonstrating SIDS leadership, which has opened many avenues for us to hold countries accountable on climate change. It is enlightening to hear your upcoming submission to the UNGA and also the work that has been going behind the scenes and on the ground in preparation for this. So I know the chair of AOSIS and our AOSIS members and family are behind you in support of these relevant benchmarks that lifts the path for SIDS. So with that, Ambassador, if you don't mind, we have about 10 minutes allocated for questions. And if you would like to speak to our colleagues online, and I know Bianca is managing the questions and answers, please kindly raise your hand.
Thank you so much, Annie. So first up, we have Victoria. Victoria, I'm unmuting you now.
Hi everyone, it's Victoria Seabrook from Sky News in the UK. Thanks so much for doing this, it's really helpful. I just wondered if you could give your reflections on China and its climate leadership in many areas and how that impacts the relationship between SIDS and China? I appreciate this is on the record and you have to be diplomatic and so on, but yeah, any reflections, very helpful. Thanks.
Bianca, do we take a
Is
couple of
that
questions?
for, yeah, I think I just want to just double check, Victoria, is that for any panelists in particular?
The more the better, if we have time.
Okay, let's just take two more. Sarah.
Hi, thanks again for doing this as well. Sarah Schoenhardt at E&E News, also understanding of the need for some level of diplomacy here, but I'm just curious, the European Union has not put forward their NDC and I think are expected to show up in New York next week quite empty-handed. I wondered, does AOSIS think they can work with a European Union that is backtracking? And what could that mean for power relations at COP30?
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to also ensure that we can get some questions directly on the ICJ Advisory Opinion. So all do please keep that in mind. Let's take one more from Matteo.
Hi, Matteo Ciolini from Climate Home News. Thank you very much for organizing this. Two questions, if I may. One on the ICJ. You sort of mentioned, the opportunity to set up some mechanisms or avenues to hold countries accountable when they breach international law. Could you specify in a bit more detail what that means and what concrete action you're planning to take in the short term? And secondly, is IOSIS finding issues with securing accommodation at COP in Belém, given all the challenges that we've heard about? And are you being forced to cut down the size of your delegations or not go at all because of this? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, all. I think that we will go first with the ICJ question. What concrete action can we really take forward? Ambassador Tavi, can you please share with us?
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, we are slowly establishing some of the measures now in our country, especially breaching the 1.5 degrees, and if you're not meeting your NDC target, so we might have to put some pressures or lobby the governments to ensure that the 1.5 degrees are in line with the 1.5. But also, I think in terms of fossil fuel production, and I mean, this is a very complex area, but this is something that we are also looking into it in terms of the fossil fuel, but more so on the national determined contribution. So we're looking, for example, if a country doesn't really meet the standard that the ICJ provided, then we have to do something about it. I think that's the way to go about it. And I think these standards apply not only to historical emitters, but to all countries, including SIDS and Vanuatu.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Tavi. I believe that we can save the other questions. I believe they're more general to our AOSIS panelists, so we can save those for the end of the session when we have our general Q&A. I just want to give anyone else who has a question specifically for Ambassador Tavi the opportunity to ask now before we move on to our other panelists. If you do, please raise your hand in the chat and I will unmute you. Okay, all good. All right. Well, then I think that we can just take one more question. And I believe that a few journalists in the chat have asked Annie about the European Union with regard to the NDCs. They've been coming late. How are we feeling with regard to the potential lack of ambition that may come out of this late submitted NDC?
Would you like me to answer that, Bianca, as well?
If you're comfortable, but also I think Ambassador Seed, if you can take this, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, I'm happy to chime in on this one. Yeah, I think we've been working with the EU as AOSIS chair. For example, our president had a bilateral with President Macron on the margins of the UN Ocean Conference to ask for support so that he was able to show some real leadership within the EU in helping deliver the 1.5 degree NDCs. So there's a lot of political work that's being done to really try to have the EU step up. We understand the politics in many EU countries is particularly challenging, and so if I'm not mistaken, the EU might be having a meeting either today or tomorrow to kind of try to flesh out some more details of what their announcement will be. We understand that they are likely to make an announcement on the 24th of September during the Secretary General's special event directed at climate and NDCs. So I think the AOSIS right now is we're continuing to ask our EU partners to step up and putting pressure on them. And then I know that the Secretary General and his team are also really keen to say that their NDC announcement will really change the momentum and the kind of ambition heading into the COP. So we hope that they are hearing these messages. But yes, I think at the climate change negotiations, EU is usually our close partner. And so I think that's messaging that we're continuing to use with them is we're constantly pushing for more ambition with the EU, especially on mitigation. And so it's kind of time to put your money where your mouth is and really step up and show leadership in this very complex geopolitical climate. So I think right now we're at a kind of wait and see situation, but certainly there's a lot of work as AOSIS that's being done to try to push them as our partners to really step up. So I think we'll know more after the 24th, and we will see what kind of follow-up work we'll need to do with the EU coming out of that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ambassador. While we have you, what do you think about taking on the question on China's climate leadership right now, and if there is any kind of influence between the island states and China, or the relationship, I should say, between AOSIS and SIDS and China?
I think, China is a little bit more, it's an interesting dynamic with China right now because they are showing a lot more ambition than they have in the past. We also understand that they will be making an announcement on the 24th, and we don't know what that kind of pathway will look like. And so I don't want to preempt any announcements because I don't know what they'll say. But they have been engaging with the Secretary General's team, and they're kind of been a lot more public in trying to keep the goals of the Paris Agreement alive. And so we had, as my president, as AOSIS chair, had a kind of small leaders meeting with a group of leaders from all over the world, and President Xi Jinping was on that call, which is the first time that I have seen him in kind of very visible in the climate space. And so I think that kind of indicates that China is really engaged in the process. What that will look like for a 1.5 degree pathway, I think we have to wait and see. But certainly they are engaging and they're continuing to say that they're honoring the commitments to the Paris Agreement. So I think the geopolitics is changing every day. We have the trade wars and tariffs and other things of that sort that are complicating a lot of the decisions that are made in the multilateral arena. But certainly, I think one of the things that we recognize is China has a lot to benefit from keeping the Paris Agreement alive in the sense that they make a lot of the technologies. And we were speaking to some diplomats who'd gone to China and said that their EV systems and their EV monorails were, just kind of leaps and bounds above and beyond what's made anywhere else. So they seem to have leapfrogged in technology, and they're showing a lot of leadership in that space. And so it's an interesting dynamic where they have capitalized on the opportunity, and we hope that they will continue to show a leadership. From our side, I don't, we're not as close to China. I would say as AOSIS is, for example, the EU. The EU has been kind of a natural partner within the UNFCCC. But certainly, I think we're kind of waiting to see what the dynamic looks like this year, because I think it will be a little bit different from how it's been in previous years.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I do see the hands raised. We will get back to you as priority when we do open the question and answer at the end of the rest of the panel. So Annie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and also Ambassador Ilana and Ambassador Sid and Ambassador Tevi for your enlightening remarks, and also in answering the questions that have been posed. I know there's it's burning up in the question chat, so we look forward to the discussions at the end of this. And as Ambassador Sid had alluded to, as AOSIS, we continue to advocate for all major emitters to submit their NDCs, and we continue to work with all groups constructively to try and achieve our goals, which means every other group matters to our goal for keeping the 1.5 alive. On that note, I would also like to thank Ambassador Tevi for your presentation, for your exemplary leadership in leading the way for us and together with the AOSIS in this front. And we understand that you have mentioned that for Vanuatu, the ICJ is an opportunity to address the systemic challenges, plan to propose, and you plan to propose a UN resolution in the coming months or in next month. So we look forward to that. To that resolution as well. And as you mentioned in your presentation, it is not the end of the journey, but it's just the start. So with that, I thank you, Ambassador Tevi, for your remarks, and we're very happy to have you both online with Ambassador Sid, but we understand your very busy schedules, but we're happy to keep you online for further answering of our questions from our colleagues after this session. Without further ado, colleagues, I now am pleased to introduce our next panelist, Miss Cheryl Jeffers, who is a good friend of ours and of mine personally, working under the AOSIS umbrella. Cheryl has served AOSIS brilliantly for 10 years as our research and systematic observation coordinator until her retirement this year. So Cheryl is a trained meteorological technician with over 15 years of climate change experience, and we have learned a lot from Cheryl at the negotiations as she led. She was the lead science negotiator for AOSIS and a good friend. So we're happy that she has agreed to come back and share with us on the latest analysis on our world's warming and where we need to be. So Cheryl, please, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Thank you, Anne, and a pleasant good day to all ambassadors, colleagues, excellencies. Bianca, can you please share the screen? Yes, so on behalf of the science team, it really gives me great pleasure to participate in this very important webinar that speaks to holding the line at 1.5 degrees, a SIDS call for climate justice and ambition on the way to COP30. Specifically, as was indicated, I would shed some light on the science of 1.5, what has been the latest analysis, and where do we need to be? Next slide, please. As many of you may be aware, 2024 has been recorded as the hottest year on record, with global observed annual average temperature increase around 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Although this has been the case, it is very important to highlight that this observation includes natural variability and cannot be directly compared to the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree limit, which refers to the human-caused long-term global average temperature change above pre-industrial levels. Suffice to say, we are not at the long-term 1.5 degree limit, but we are getting very close. Slide 3, please. So the question we must therefore ask ourselves as we prepare for COP is, what does this mean? And please allow me to highlight a few points that will affect us as AOSIS family should we continue business as usual. With every increment of warming, and especially above a 1.5 degree, key risk increases, including to unique and threatened systems, as well as risks of extreme events. Additionally, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius would substantially curb the impacts and risks to ocean, terrestrial, and freshwater ecosystems. Next slide. Due to inertia in the climate system, sea level rise will continue for millennia, but how fast and by how much will be determined by future emissions. Sea level rise poses grave impacts and risks to low-lying states such as ours, to coastal flooding and inundation, as well as flooding damages to coastal infrastructure, groundwater salinization, and losses in coastal ecosystems and the associated ecosystems. This basically means that sea level rise must be slowed down. Next slide. As it relates to our reefs, our coral reefs are at an alarming risks with warming at and above 1.5 degrees Celsius. Further, at a 1.5 degree warming, 70 to 90% of warm corals will be lost. Near complete loss of coral reefs are projected at 2 degrees Celsius. And limits to adaptation by coral reef species will be reached before a 1.5 degree warming. This means that there'll be an escalated risk to food systems and livelihoods based on tropical and subtropical fisheries with warming temperatures. Slide 6. As it relates to ocean acidification, only reductions in CO2 emissions that is aligned with a 1.5 degree pathway can return ocean pH values to pre-2010 levels. Next slide, please. Many of our climate impacts, risks, and loss and damage are amplified for small islands. This primarily is why we as an AOSIS family must lead the fight. Freshwater stress is expected to occur because of aridity changes. Constraining warming to 1.5, however, could avoid a substantial fraction of water stress. Also, sea level rise above global average, coastal flooding and erosion would be a major concern given a high share of our population infrastructure and economic assets in low elevation coastal is well below 10 meters. It is already known that small islands are already reporting loss and damage, particularly from tropical cyclones and increases in sea level rise. and extremes are increasingly driving displacement, with small island states among those that are disproportionately affected and relative to our small population size. Next slide, please. Now, based on our current trend, there are risks of temporarily exceeding a 1.5 degrees Celsius. If emissions are not lowered rapidly, reaching 1.5 could occur as early as 2030. Exceeding of 1.5 of warming with an even and temporary overshoot would result in more irreversible losses and adverse impacts. This means that we need to bring down temperature, which requires achieving a net negative CO2 emissions through a rapid increase of scale deployment of carbon dioxide removals. This will reduce long-term risks associated with ice sheet tipping points, ocean acidification, and giving coral reefs possibility of recovery. It is very important to note that we will not be able to return to the same world as before, since some climate impacts, such as sea level rise, will not be reversible after an overshoot. This is why we have to do as much as we can to limit overshoot. As we approach COP30, the question is, what do we do? And the very short answer is, as SIDS, we fight. We fight to ensure that our key messages are linked to the long-term temperature goal, which is and continues to be an enduring part of the Paris Agreement. Whilst we have not yet reached the Paris Agreement's limit of 1.5, lack of action to date increases the risk of at least temporary overshooting. Overshooting of a 1.5 will be a serious political failure, but it would not mean the Paris Agreement limit is no longer valid. Even in the case of reaching a 1.5 degree, the legal, moral, and policy significance of the Paris Agreement's long-term temperature goal, which is linked to Article 2.1, and the net zero goal, which is linked to Article 4.1, still remain very valid and unchanged. Slide 10. To greater context, let me give you some quick insights into what Article 2.1 states. It speaks to holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and pursuing efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the impacts and risks of climate change. As it relates to Article 4.1, it speaks to the fact that in order to achieve the long-term temperature goal set out in Article 2, parties aim to reach a global peaking as soon as possible and must undertake rapid reductions thereafter in accordance with the best available science so as to achieve between anthropogenic emissions by sources and removal by sinks of greenhouse gases in the second half of the century. Next slide. We can skip to this slide and the other one. And the next one. Yes, correct. And so to just summarize and to give some insights as it relates to Article 2.1 and Article 2.4. The 1.5 limit, which is linked to Article 1, and the net zero goal, which is linked to Article 4.1, can be operationalized to provide guidance. And this must be based on the best available science on policies at the global and national level, and the level and rate of mitigation action needed to limit overshoots. The increasing risk of overshoot increases the pressure on governments to introduce policies that rapidly reduce emissions. And before COP30 in Brazil to substantially improve their 2030 NDC targets and have them aligned with their 2035 targets with 1.5 degrees Celsius. Next slide. We recognize that finance will always be a challenge. We do acknowledge that the current financial flows are insufficient, but as AOSIS, we believe that there's sufficient global capital to close the global mitigation investment gap. Economic benefits from avoiding climate damages and from reduced adaptation costs and increase the stringency of mitigation. Next slide. So what do we do at COP30? The science team will focus on research and systematic observations. We recognize that both the Convention and the Paris Agreement highlight the importance of research and systematic observations to build a robust, accurate understanding of the Earth's climate system, and therefore all actions must be taken based on the best available science. We will use every window possible and remind every party as this information. Our COP priority should continue to include and to strengthen the recognition of the science. As we recognize that periodic review will also be on the discussion for the upcoming COP, and parties should agree to periodically review the adequacy of the long-term global goal and the progress towards achieving it. And as such, as a priority for SIDS, we continue to achieving the continuation of this review as we recognize that it is the only dedicated space that reflects the latest science on 1.5 degrees. Next slide. So the science is clear. Based on the AR6 Working Group 2 SPM, the cumulative scientific evidence is unequivocal. Climate change is a threat to human being and planetary health. Any further delay in concerted anticipatory global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable, and sustainable future for all. Next slide. As SIDS, we recognize that IPCC is and has been providing the best available science, and we are hoping that the rest of the parties, as mentioned, must recognize that this is also the case. The IPCC was established to provide governments at all levels with the scientific information that they can use to develop climate policies. The assessment reports have been informing international global negotiations since the 1900s, and IPCC for us did provide vital source of the input for the first global stocktake in ensuring that the availability of global and regional data on the state of the climate systems, mitigation, and progress were available. I will also use this opportunity to highlight that the IPCC 7th assessment cycle has begun, and we are hoping that the alignment can be done to inform the next global stocktake, and also to use this opportunity, recognizing that we have many parties on the floor, that the next IPCC P63, which take place in Lima in 27th and 30th October, is an opportunity for us to ensure that all of our SIDS voices are represented at this upcoming session. Next slide. And to summarize, we recognize that the current level of global warming already have devastating consequences around the world. Holding the 1.5 limits and limiting overshoot minimizes the worst impacts, risks, and loss and damage. Greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2070 must be recognized because the 1.5 degree goal is operational. It provides a benchmark for nearly all mitigation-related energy policies, such as those adopted in the global stocktake. As the ambassador would have indicated earlier, giving up on 1.5 would lead to a backsliding of ambition and will surely signify a betrayal of SIDS and other vulnerable communities. Also, that was identified by our other ambassador, the ICJ in its recent Advisory Opinion on Climate Change has confirmed that the 1.5 has scientifically based consensus temperature limit of the Paris Agreement. Before I close, I wish to also thank the AOSIS family for having the opportunity to present today. As many of you know, that I have now passed on the baton to the new science coordinator, Mr. Ari Simon of Antigua and Barbuda. I trust and hope that you will give him all of the support that you have given me over the last 10 years, and that the team will continue to keep the science at the forefront. As we deliberate and plan for COP30, please remember that science is not negotiable. The good thing about science is that it is true whether others want to believe it or not. Let us keep our messaging clear, deeply rooted in science. Although it may appear a bit dark and gloomy, I want to challenge all of us to stay rooted in the science as we deliberate on the various tracks in the upcoming COP. Collectively, we can do it. We have done it before, and it is all about survival. And I trust that we will do it again. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. And like I said in the introduction of Cheryl, she is why we miss her at the negotiations, because she has been a pillar of strength and a lead negotiator for AOSIS for many years behind the science and keeping the science at the forefront. So I'd like to thank you very much, Cheryl, for your extremely informative presentation, highlighting that the current levels of warming are already having devastating consequences, including vulnerable ecosystems like coral reefs. And without mitigation ambition aligned with 1.5 pathways, will lead to dangerous overshoot, and we need to pursue this. And the IPCC is the best available science, and this continues to be our guide, and we need to ensure it continues to be, keeping this messaging deeply rooted in science. And thank you also for highlighting the IPCC 63 that is coming up at the end of October, and the AOSIS chair will also host a briefing prior to this for all countries who will be at IPCC. So thank you very much, Cheryl, and please continue to stay on if you have some time. I understand there's a lot of questions coming for you, but I thank you for your informative presentation. Thank you, Cheryl. Our next speaker is is a good friend of AOSIS and also a good friend of ours, Miss Tina Stecki, the climate envoy for the Republic of the Marshall Islands. She also serves as international liaison for the Marshallese Educational Initiative, the MEI, and we at AOSIS applaud her for her unwavering dedication to supporting and strengthening island communities. The Marshall Islands were among the first countries to step up with the new NDC submission, and Tina will share more on this with us. We welcome Tina. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Yahweh and greetings to all. My thanks to Ambassador Seed, Anne, of course, and the whole AOSIS Chairs team for convening this very important discussion. It's really an honor to join you and my fellow panelists today. I'm here today to speak to the Marshall Islands 2035 NDC and our experience putting that together, and hope that it, shows not just our effort, our own effort, and how it's meant to help us achieve our goals, but how we hope it can inform the effort of others as they submit their own NDCs in this critical year. Next slide, please. Thanks, Bianca. So the Marshall Islands was one of the 15 countries to submit its NDC by the February deadline. Meeting that deadline was difficult, but we really did have the strong political leadership from our president and our cabinet to deliver. And I will never forget being at COP29 and being instructed that in no uncertain terms this would be done by February 15. And I think that is what's required, right? You need that political will, you need that leadership from the very top. We also had a team of people who were working to make it happen, but having that political leadership from the very top really helped us to advance our efforts on at home. Our NDC commits to achieving an absolute reduction in GHG emissions of at least 58% below 2010 levels by 2035, covering all major gases and sectors towards our goal of achieving net zero by 2050. And I'm really glad that I'm following Cheryl here, because I should say as well that, that target is really grounded in what we are informed by the best available science. And how it can align to 1.5. For us, it was very important to start with the level of ambition needed to keep 1.5 degrees within reach, and as well as to follow through on the global stocktake outcomes and then find the solutions to get us there. It was also very important to reflect the level of ambition necessary to address the climate impacts facing our communities. We therefore included sections on adaptation priorities and objectives situated within the broader context of sustainable development across sectors and the impacts of loss and damage that is already affecting our development aims. Our overall aim in NDC 3.0 is to provide a much more holistic view of ambition and action on the ground in the Marshalls, than had been provided in previous NDCs. And I think this is really a reflection of how far we've come in the last 10 years, that we can sort of speak in this more holistic way in the NDC. Next slide, please. So the NDC is built on foundational documents that, provide that very strong foundation of existing strategies and policies. These include previous NDCs, our long-term strategy, and sectoral strategies. Next slide, please. And together, these documents as a whole provide a coherent and aligned framework that guides our climate ambition and implementation. Next slide, please. So especially after our sustained efforts in advocating for outcomes under the global stocktake, we really felt that it was essential that NDCs clearly articulate each country's contribution toward our shared goals. So particularly those outcomes that we did fight so hard for. And we know that that does include, in particular, the need to transition away from fossil fuels, which is really at the heart of what needs to be done to address the climate crisis. So we also know we're not the only ones taking this seriously. We know that islands have long been leaders in this, and others, like Switzerland and the UK, who also submitted NDCs on time in February. These did set out how they'd implement commitments to that transition away from fossil fuels, triple renewables, and double energy efficiency. But as has been mentioned by other speakers ahead of me, that there are many more countries, and especially major emitters, that really need to step up and provide this kind of clarity in their updated NDCs. Next slide, please. This was an all of society approach that we adopted in putting this together. We firmly believe that every community, every individual in our society holds a repository of history and experience and locally grounded solutions. And we have to come together embracing an all of society approach as a core pillar of how we respond to climate change and how we put together an NDC. So as the NDC was being drafted, the Climate Change Directorate held a 3-day event that brought together stakeholders from across the islands to discuss climate change priorities. This event built on an extensive process of community consultation that had taken part for the National Adaptation Plan, published 2 years prior. We've been doing climate-related consultations for years now. It's an ongoing process. We have to continue to be in conversation with our communities in order to, I think, get this right, or even have a chance of getting it right. In addition, the NDC development also gave us an opportunity to take stock of all climate-related efforts across government and bring them together in a coherent national strategy, which was made possible through close coordination with ministries and departments. And we use an institution that we've established in the Marshalls called the TTEC, or Tele-Teleo Committee, which is essentially an interagency group committee that brings together relevant departments, ministries on any climate-related issue, project that needs to take decisions that go to our president and our cabinet. Next slide, please. I just wanted to share a couple examples of the actual measures on the ground that we're taking to achieve the goals outlined in the NDC. And focusing first on low carbon transportation. We have a long history of navigation, and the many islands that make up our country are very far apart, meaning that an important source of emissions for us is inter-island transport. Our low carbon maritime transport project, which has support from Germany and the Republic of Korea, is taking a two-pronged approach to this, one very high tech and another that is quite traditional. So for shorter distance, we're strengthening traditional canoe building skills for transport within our atoll lagoons, partnering with the Wan Island and Majel, a local CSO, to train young people in these important techniques. For longer inter-island transport needs, we recently launched a state-of-the-art hybrid sailing ship called the Juranai. The Juranai uses wind and solar technology and energy to significantly reduce reliance on imported fossil fuels. We would really like to see these technologies and vessels replicated across the Marshalls and beyond. But access to significantly scaled up climate finance will be necessary to see these efforts move beyond the sort of pilot project stage. And I think this is something true across for many of our SIDS. We have so many great and successful projects, initiatives that if we could just scale up, could really help provide solutions, we believe, for the world. Next slide, please. We have quite limited space for infrastructure, and that creates challenges for the deployment of renewable energy. So we're mounting solar panels wherever we can and exploring innovative ocean-based technology. Scaling up renewables is as much an adaptation measure as a mitigation one for us as we work for a future which is energy secure through low emission technologies. So this is something that based on our electricity roadmap, our National Energy Office is working hard to do and secure that transition away from fossil fuels. Again, we will need more support, but we have the plans in place, and we're doing as much as we can with the finance that we can access. We're also making hard for infrastructure investments in, for example, water security as another adaptive measure, including ensuring that we have freshwater availability in the face of sea level rise and seawater intrusion. Large freshwater catchments such as this one have been distributed to communities throughout the islands with the help of the GCF, UNDP, and Australia Aid. Next slide, please. And I'll just end here by saying that for us, the development of the RMI's NDC was an opportunity to update our commitments in alignment with climate science, the global stocktake, and our community's needs. But even if we implement our NDC to a T, it won't be enough to protect our homes unless everyone, particularly major emitters, do their part. We hope our NDC sets an example that a strong NDC isn't about choosing only what's easy or knowing all the answers from the start. What matters is our willingness to live up to the commitments we've made, to play our part in the global system that we've established to address the greatest threat to our safe and secure future. Komoltada, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tina, again for her great illustration of how small island developing states are advancing climate action and the support we need for implementation, and highlighting on the ground work that is happening on the ground in Marshall Islands, and your political leadership, as you have highlighted, since Marshall Islands was among the first countries to step up with their new NDC submission. So demonstrates really good political will. The interagency coordination was critical, and of course, we have all these plans as you have highlighted, but the need for climate finance is also very, very important and key to show how SIDS, despite challenges, are stepping up to lead. So I'd like to thank you very much, Tina, for your presentation. And please also stay online for questions, because I know a lot of people are raising their hands, but Bianca will manage that towards the end. So thank you again, Tina, for that presentation. Colleagues, Excellencies, friends, let's hear from our final speaker today, Ms. Toyata Abeluwili. Toyata is, like Cheryl, is our brilliant mitigation lead negotiator, coordinator for AOSIS, and she serves as the Assistant Chief Executive Officer for the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Samoa. And Toyata will speak to us today for us why the urgent action on greenhouse gas emissions is critical in keeping our world out of certain danger. So with those remarks, I would like to hand the floor over to Toyata, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Toyata. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Talofa lava and warm greetings to you all. As Madam Moderator has mentioned, my name is Toyata Beluwili. And I'm very honored and humbled to be on this panel and to speak to you today on behalf of the mitigation team, as well as on behalf of my country, Samoa. And this is, to raise our collective voice for urgent actions on emissions and to hold the line on the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who has made this webinar possible, and also to our fellow speakers, and of course to everyone who's participating and listening in today. And to begin with, I like to share a Samoan proverb that I believe that it beautifully captures the essence of this webinar and the importance of holding the line of 1.5 degrees Celsius target. And it goes like this. Ole fungava ai tasi, a faufa atasi tu tasi. In English, it's translated, we are all in one canoe, and if we build it together, we will stand strong together and reach the first line first. This Samoan proverb, it speaks of unity, it speaks of shared responsibility, and also a collective journey as SIDS working together and battle in unison, and as we support one another to navigate the turbulent waters ahead going to COP30. So as I speak for the next 10 minutes or less, I invite you to keep that proverb in mind, that we are all in one canoe, and if we build it together, we will stand strong together and reach the finish line first. Next slide, please. The science is clear. 2024 was the hottest year on record, and very much thanks to Cheryl, who presented on this topic, and it clearly outlines that the science is clear, and it states what it needs to state in terms of the temperature rise and where we are at the moment. And while this does not mean that, the Paris Agreement 1.5 limits has been breached, it's a starking warning that if we do not quickly and seriously reduce emissions, the temperature will certainly exceed the 1.5 limit, and it will occur as early as 2030. And with the current policies and targets, it put us on a path towards 2.7 degrees Celsius warming by 2100. And a massive overshoot is inevitable unless emissions are reduced very quickly. Overshooting the 1.5 will be a very serious political failure. But it does not mean that the Paris Agreement has failed, and I think a couple of speakers has mentioned this. Instead, it demands accelerated and ambitious actions. It calls for urgent actions on emissions, not tomorrow, not next year, but now. And as SIDS, we call on major emitters, and we've been very vocal on this, to act now. And we demand urgent, deep, and sustained cuts to greenhouse gas emissions every fraction, because we understand that every fraction of degree of emission of the temperature will put our islands and our homes, especially our people, and their way of life at risk. So the science is clear, the impacts are real, and the time for action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is now. So as we sail our journey towards the COP, we must remember that holding the line for 1.5 is not just a slogan for SIDS. It is a lifetime for our vulnerable communities across the globe, especially for our small island developing states. Next slide, please. However, there's hopeful news in terms of, when we say hopeful, is that there is affordable mitigation options available today that can close the emission gap, and sufficient global capital is available to close the global mitigation investment gap as well. And rescuing the 1.5 is still possible, but only if we act urgently, as in now. We act now. And we act in a way and that's a must, that we achieve the deep greenhouse gas reductions in our 2030 and 2035 NDCs. And Tina has presented on how Marshall Islands has done this by presenting in their NDCs 3.0. And failure to substantially improve our 2030 NDCs, even if 2035 NDCs are aligned with 1.5, it could make a substantial overshoot inevitable. So we need to pursue as well the phasing out of fossil fuel. We also need to submit 1.5 aligned NDCs that reflect real ambition and looking at implementing the global stocktake outcomes, especially when we look at the energy package, where AOSIS as well as SIDS has been very vocal in terms of tripling global renewable energy capacity, doubling global average annual rates of energy efficiency improvements by 2030. These are all some the things that we need to implement going forward so that we are able to cut down on greenhouse gas emissions and definitely to make sure that it is the 1.5 it's reached won't be go above the 1.5 target. Next slide, please. Since November 2024, only 29 new NDCs have been submitted, and the deadline for submissions of NDCs, I understand, is in September this month at the UNSG Climate Summit in New York. And of the 29, only 2, I understand, is United Kingdom, UK, and Norway are analyzed, and as what analyzed and being highlighted as 1.5 aligned. Many other emitters have not submitted, such as EU and China have not submitted, but have presented a joint statement in July 2025 indicating an intention to submit before COP30 of their respective NDCs and covering all economic sectors and all greenhouse gas emissions in alignment with the long-term temperature goal of Paris Agreement. Yet recent news has reported that the EU submission will not come before the deadline. So we continue to encourage and the call for these major emitters to make the submission and be made on time to include in the NDC synthesis report, which is supposed to due ahead of COP30. SIDS has already shown true leadership, and 8 SIDS have submitted the NDC 3.0. And we note this, despite our neglectable emissions and capacity constraints to develop NDC, we forge ahead and show leadership on the issue. And in order to keep the 1.5 alive, we must pursue a COP30 package that keeps the 1.5 within reach by delivering a response to NDCs, because there's potential there. And with the ambition gap, which is likely to be revealed during the NDC synthesis report, there is potential to make sure that we keep that 1.5 and can reach that 1.5 target. So COP30, we call for a package that responds to the ambition gap, and we must ensure that the implementation of mitigation elements, as we continue to be vocal about, which was highlighted in the GSD outcome, is pursued, particularly the energy package, as I mentioned before, transitioning away from fossil fuels, removal of fossil fuel subsidies, tripling renewable energy, and doubling energy efficiency. If COP30 does not put us on a pathway to 1.5, we risk overshoot. And that overshoot puts our vulnerable communities in grave danger. So the International Court of Justice has affirmed that 1.5 as the relevant legal benchmark. And for AOSIS, this is not just a number, it is a lifeline. And we continue to hold the line at COP30 because we have no other choice. And we will not give up that fight. We will definitely and do not want to fail all our lands and all our people and the future of SIDS. Next slide, please. In closing, I leave you with the same Samoan proverb that guided my 2 cents added to the panel discussion. We are all in one canoe, and if we build it together, we will stand strong together and reach the finish line first. It reminds us, no matter where we come from, we are all navigating the same ocean of climate challenges. So we act now with courage and urgency and unity. Thank you for listening and your attention.
Thank you very much, Toyota, for your wise words and your guidance also in the presentation. And thank you very much for that proverb, Samoan proverb, which means we act together. It reminds me of COP28, our last day in Dubai, our last day of the COP that overflowed, and the wise words from the minister then of RMI. I think Tina would remember this, Minister who's the ambassador now in New York, he said the same thing, that we are in one canoe, and if there are holes in the canoe, we will all not make it to the finish line. So I think with that words Toyota has said, that we need to work together and act together, resonates with what Cheryl and Tina and also Ambassador Ilana and Ambassador Tevi had said in the beginning, where we continue to amplify our voices and continue the fight go towards COP30. And thank you for highlighting the work that the mitigation team is doing. Of course, highlighting and resonating what Cheryl had said, that overshoot will be detrimental to our vulnerable people. The science is clear and urges all of us to act now, and we need the action of major emitters to help us to keep us the 1.5 Celsius. So we will be pursuing an outcome at COP30, which keeps us at 1.5 Celsius aligned. I know there were a lot of questions in the chat, but this is what AOSIS and I believe all our members are hoping to achieve at COP30 is an outcome that pursue that outcome at COP30 and keeping the 1.5 Celsius aligned NDCs as well. With that final presentation from our mitigation coordinator, Toyota, I'd like to thank all our esteemed panelists. We've had a wealth of knowledge, fruitful discussion from such experienced, but also well-versed panelists in their field. So with that, we now have time for some of our audience questions, and kindly do raise your hands, and we will unmute. And of course, Bianca will moderate the question sessions. Thank you very much, Toyota, and please stay online for the questions again. Thank you. Over to you, Bianca.
Very much, Annie. So let's go to Jeffrey and John. Jeffrey, you can go first.
Hello, this is Jeff Utmark from TransTech Marine Company and ShipShares LLC. We're based in New York, USA. I'd like to thank all excellencies, ambassadors, colleagues, friends, Madam Moderator, for having this webinar and inviting people to join. Of course, I'm an American. We know there are many Americans who are in total support of everything that has been discussed today. So I'm asking for AOSIS to consider another platform for COP30. And this platform would be when the science is irrefutable, but is unrecognized because of political leadership or lack thereof in some parts of the world. And yet there are people in those parts of the world who want to assist the goals. Could there be a new platform or a modified platform that would unify FDI in all SIDS so that it would not be so complex for a group in the US, for instance, that wants to help with a specific project? They would know that this project could be applied in any SIDS that had a unified code for foreign direct investment. This would, of course, help mitigate the funding gap that was referred to by Ambassador Jeffers, I believe it was. All of the comments were so wonderful, so on target, I can't remember them all. I hope the transcript of this webinar is going to be provided. But my comment is thank you. I see that most of the efforts discussed today are on a government-to-government basis. I understand that. I'm asking if there might be a consideration of a bold departure from purely government to government. Is there a way that people to people can be brought in? And imagine the global impact if millions of Americans supported what was discussed today at the people to people level. I'd like to take this opportunity to again note that we are based in New York. We would like to be part of a think tank or task force to help implement this if there would be interest. And we've been doing work in this area for a very long time, so I think we can show that.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
So thank you very much, and I apologize if I went on a little.
No worries. And let's take another from John.
Hi, yes, it's John Angel from Bloomberg News. Thanks very much for the briefing and good to see some familiar faces take to the floor. My question, I think it was asked right at the beginning, but AOSIS obviously was well aware of the accommodation situation in Belém and made the presidency aware of its concerns earlier on in the year. I'm just wondering if those concerns have now been alleviated and whether AOSIS and member states of AOSIS will be sending a full-strength negotiating team to Belém. And then just secondly, if I may, what form, what shape do you think a good outcome from this COP30 summit will take? Obviously, there's a bit of a push, and it seems like Brazil might be heeding it, that there could be some sort of declaration responding to the NDC synthesis. I'm just wondering what you would like to see included in that, given there's concern from other parts of the world that they don't want to see another global stocktake 2 years after the last. Thank you.
Thanks so much, John. Before we go to the other questions, I wonder if Ambassador Seed, she actually, I'm not sure if many of you know, but she has a background in finance. So I am interested if she would like to tackle the question on foreign direct investments.
Sure. I will take a crack at it. Yes, I think, Jeffrey, as you mentioned, most of our work at AOSIS and under the UNFCCC is on a government basis. And so we are employed by governments and we're doing government work. However, within AOSIS, a key part of our development priorities are reliant on partnerships, and that includes not just government partnerships, but also private sector partnerships as well. So in terms of getting kind of people to people engagement, I would say a lot of that is kind of funneled through NGOs, and that will differ depending on the country that you're talking about. On kind of public-private partnerships and things of that sort, we also, that also depends on the country, so the island that you are mentioning. So for example, I think some of the islands in the Pacific, we have kind of special relationships with the United States, and so there could be private and foreign direct investment into projects that would be that would essentially have a guarantee from a specific kind of organization within the U.S. government. And so that would help facilitate some of the projects that you may be thinking about. So I think it's depending on what kind of project and in which region you'd be interested in, those structures would be different. I'd also say there's something called SIDS doc, which it's chaired by the ambassador of Tonga. And it's a kind of SIDS grown organization that attempts to address the lack of financing available for projects. But also, so that could potentially include private sector partnerships as well. So I'd say that those are maybe two areas that we could look at to kind of steer you in that direction. I think there's a lot of organizations that focus on climate, but climate is, as you can tell from this call, is quite varied. So there's the top level negotiations, and then there's on the ground implementation, and there's public to public partnerships, public to private, and then there's a lot of NGO community-based work around climate as well. We'd be very happy to kind of dialogue with you and share resources to see if there might be any of that intersect. Thanks, Bianca.
Thanks so much, Ambassador. And actually, while we have you, would it be possible for you to address the questions with regard to the accommodation and logistics issues at COP30?
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have too much in terms of an update. So we, as AOSIS, have been in contact with the incoming COP presidency to share our concerns with respect to the availability of accommodations as well as the price. The AOSIS representative on the bureau is working with the incoming COP presidency. If I'm not mistaken, they will have a meeting fairly soon. That's a follow up to a few meetings we've had before. But for example, the incoming COP presidency is offering 15 rooms per delegation. So we've come back to them to say that's not sufficient. And then we need also for the cost to match the DSA that's offered for Belém. So there's still quite a few things that need to get ironed out, and we're working with Brazil's incoming COP presidency. Unfortunately, at this point in time, there isn't very much of an update that I can give.
Thanks very much, Ambassador. And to go back to John's other question, I would love if actually Ambassador Tevi, Tina, and Toyata, would you be able to share your perspectives? So what he is asking, what do SIDS expect to be a good outcome from the COP? It seems that Brazil is increasingly weighing a declaration that responds to the NDC synthesis. But what do we as SIDS, what would we want to see in it, given a pushback from some countries that they don't want to have another global stocktake type outcome? So can we go with Ambassador Tevi first, then Tina, and then go to Toya? Ambassador Tevi?
Well, thank you for your question. I think what is for us to need is if we can collectively put pressures on the states that have not meet the 1.5 degrees, especially to be in line with their national determined contribution. So if we can speak in one voice, I think it's very important. And just to remind states that it's also their legal obligations to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, especially the NDC. So I think the only way is for us to work collectively, and we have to continue to do the lobby now before going to COP30. And we have to continue to call for a stocktake. I think that's the only way to go, given that we are now facing this climate crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Tina?
Yes, thanks for the question. And I think we know we're off track, right? So, I mean, that's very clear. I think we've all talked about the commitments that have already been made. And the stock take that was done really does provide a very clear outline of what needs to be done, and we agreed that it has holes in it. It could be better, but it does provide the framework for the action that needs to be taken. And I think what was said at the very beginning of the webinar, what is lacking is political will. And that's what we need to see countries come to the COP with. And in fact, we need to see countries step up next week, really, and show that there's political will to actually implement and deliver on the promises and commitments that have already been made. The ICJ AO just gives a further legal recognition of how important delivery is for those commitments. And I think it's very important that we see at COP30 this reflected in a negotiated outcome, right? We need to see, I mean, that is what I think, sorry, it's because it's the end of the webinar, so I'm losing some of my words, but that is what will project the political will, that all 195 countries will come together with a negotiated outcome. And then I think I don't know, I don't think it's come up yet, but we should be seeing finance pledges, right? So many of us have these plans that we want to deliver, but for many of us, it is tied to delivery of finance commitments and replenishment of the funds and the finance to deliver should be something that is also, signaled in the next weeks and months, ahead of COP30. And last but not least, making sure that we see ambition across the board. We need those mitigation commitments delivered. We also need, and this is directly related to finance, the adaptation action. So those are some of the things that the Marshall Islands, alongside all our brothers and sisters in AOSIS, I think will be fighting for at COP30.
Thanks so much, Tina. And finally, Toya, over to you.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you as well for the question. I think we continue to be vocal. That's one important thing that going to COP30. And COP30, we need to, in order to keep the 1.5 alive, which is very important for SIDS, we must pursue a COP30 package that keeps the 1.5 alive within reach by delivering a response to NDCs, because there is potential, as I mentioned before, there's potential to look at that ambition gap, and we must continue to be strong in our call, especially to the major emitters on that aspect as well. And it's important that we continue to voice that call as well on the need to implement on the mitigation elements. And this is from a mitigation perspective as well. The mitigation elements within the GSD outcome needs to be implemented as soon as. So that is one of the main things that we would like to see and for the COP presidency to deliver as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Toyat, and thank you so much to all our presenters. I just want to say quickly, thank you very much to our audience for their questions. And if you do have another question, please hold, because we are planning a presser for next week, which would love to have you all join again. So we will expand on any issues and respond to any new questions if you do have them. I will just head over to Annie to give our closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Bianca. And I think I just wanted to one more response to the question about the global stock take. I think a 5-yearly global stock take is required by the Paris Agreement, so there's no way that we should not have a second GSD, which is part of the Paris Agreement. So I think that that's something that needs to be clear. We agreed to this in the Paris Agreement, so a global stock take needs to take place, which is the second GSD. But I just wanted to summarize some of our discussions today, but particularly also in addressing the I know our colleagues and our esteemed panelists has answered the question on an outcome at COP30. I think we need the mitigation ambition to be addressed at this COP. It's a very critical opportunity to get in line with 1.5. We need a response to the NDCs or any gap which may be revealed. The need for the GSD implementation, the first GST implementation. We need the climate finance to flow for all areas, including loss and damage. The global goal on adaptation, the GGA, is also a critical outcome at COP30, and the need to just transition to move to implementation and practice. And of course, the long fight that we've all been on is the special circumstances of SIDS to be realized and operationalized through all this. So with that, I'd like to thank all our esteemed panelists, particularly beginning from our ambassadors, Ambassador Seed and Ambassador Tevi, for your expertise, your wisdom imparting to our discussion today, and also the dynamic discussion from our colleagues and esteemed panelists, Tina, Cheryl, and Toyata. we have come here today. We do understand there will be more parts to these webinar, and more discussions to be heard. I heard a lot of questions and a lot of not only just government to government, but bringing in probably civil societies and all other indigenous and communities. There are a lot of platforms that have these sort of voices, and we do hear that loud and clear. And we believe that our hopes and what we have discussed today will reach the ears and hearts of those who can spur the action that we need for a safer world. And we make clear that countries cannot arrive at COP30 without real intent to raise their ambition and take transformative actions. Our SIDS will be there, standing firm and continuing to hold the line on 1.5. But thank you very much to all for being here today, and especially thank you to all our panelists, our ambassadors online, the chair of AOSIS, Ambassador Seed. On behalf of the chair, we wish you a great afternoon. Thank you very much, Bianca, for hosting also our webinar. And thank you to all our questions as well and things discussion. Thank you and have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you're tuning from. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.